Welcome back. You're listening Across the Border. It's a Prophecy Reality Edition. We're live on a Wednesday morning going into our second hour here. I'm waiting for Patrick to Skype in. It's on. If you get on there and you can hear me, just say something and I will hear you because I have the volume up and should be able to hear you. Anyway, really appreciated you contacting me. And Patrick is a listener. And so we're going to see what Patrick has to say. Now, some years ago, you had a little problem with your church. You actually got kicked out of the church or were forced to leave because you wouldn't go along with dispensational eschatology. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct, but it was more recent than that. Actually, at the end of January this year is when that occurred.
Oh, okay. Well, why don't you tell me how that all started and it came about? Go back to the beginning.
Back to the beginning. Well, I left Methodism back in 2017 after discovering their affiliation with the National Council of Churches. After leaving the Methodist Church and seeking out another congregation, I came up empty-handed in my hometown. It was hard to find a church that wasn't a 501c3. At that time, I still was under the auspices of futurist eschatology, so that wasn't even a concern. But I tried a number of churches and called to several other ones trying to find a good fit. And so many of them are tied to national conferences, and it's difficult to know where your support and where the congregation support is going and what have you. So I ended up affiliating with a church online that was not a 501c3. They were almost a King James only church, operated in the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And after attending online faithfully for a number of months, they announced that they were going to begin a ministry school. And I applied to that ministry school, and I was accepted. I was kind of surprised by that, but I went for a 4-day conference and orientation. It's about 5 hours away from me. So my extended church family, I got to meet them and interact with the staff, and that was all great. This would have been in the fall of 2018. I took their full boat of classes that they offered. So I had 4 ministry school classes in that fall semester of 2018 and 2019. I only took one course, which was eschatology. Okay. And as a part of that course requirement, we had to do a research paper. We had 10 topics to choose from, and I happened to have chosen to focus on the Jesuits.
I'm really surprised that they had the Jesuits as one of the topics available.
Actually, there were pretty risque topics like Kabbalah, Freemasonry. I think the Pope himself was one of the topics. So the church was kind of cutting edge and trying to expose deceptions within the church and within the world and the movement towards the New World Order and all that sort of thing. So,
yeah, but Patrick, you may have gone a little too far. Go ahead, continue on with the narration.
Okay. Well, in researching the Jesuits, I came to find their eschatological tampering that took place back in the late 1500s, early 1600s. And my research paper that you mentioned earlier that you had read, in there I outlined some of the things that they had done, like tampering with the divine time measure and rubber banding Daniel's 70th week to 2,000 years hence, and all that didn't sit well with me. So as part of my research paper, I had questioned how the futurist school could justify, or by what authority did they adjust the divine time measure. So I never got an answer. There was about an 8 or 9 month gap in between, and
Okay, well, bookmark that thought there. You were waiting
Yes.
at 8 months in between. And do you mind if I put a link in the chat room to your paper, research paper?
Oh, I would love that.
Okay, well, I'm going to do that then. Okay, go ahead and continue then.
Okay. So I waited, being under the auspices of spiritual authority, which happened to be one of the 4 courses that I took in my first semester. Our study was Watchman Nee's Spiritual Authority. You're probably familiar with that book. And I waited, but before the February 4th start date of the semester, what would have been my last semester, to finish up my final 2 courses out of the total 7 that they offered, I reiterated the questions that I had asked in my Jesuit research paper, and the response was not real good. I rated as emotional, and they couldn't provide any justification for altering the divine time measure and what have you. And there was a little conversation back and forth between myself and the pastor instructor, and it resulted in them cutting me off from the congregation, removing me from the school. So it was an online congregation that you had YouTube and Facebook as options for attending. There were also, I think, 3 other Facebook pages that were associated with the church family, and I was blocked and removed from all of those.
Wow.
Yeah, and when I discovered the Jesuit tampering originally, I thought, man, this all of our lives, this is all I've ever known. We've always been taught the futurist eschatology, and everybody's waiting for the man of sin to be revealed and the third temple to be built. And
well, I did like the way you put that they're tampering with the divine timeline given in the scripture. That's a pretty distinct way of putting it, because that's exactly what they have done.
It is. That's given in, I believe, Numbers 4:4, and there's also an Ezekiel passage. I forget the chapter and verse. You might recall it right off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and definitely Daniel's 70 weeks timeline.
Right.
Putting a gap in there.
Well, and the changing of the year-day principle, which the Reformation Fathers and true Christians like the Huguenots and the Waldensians before them, they were firm in the year-day principle, and now the futurists take in Revelation, they changed the year-day to a day-day principle, which by what authority do they do that as well? So there's a lot of holes in the futurist, and after studying for the last 8 or 9 months, I just felt like it was my duty to point it out, and I was hoping, being that they were cutting edge and pointing out deceptions, that they would embrace the opportunity and enlist our kingdom workers to bring that deception to the fore. So that
do you think that perhaps when they put the Pope and the Jesuits as potential articles of interest, that they were actually hoping that you would find something good to say about them?
Not necessarily, no.
But I mean, for them to excoriate you and excommunicate you because you actually did look into those things and come to the conclusions you came to, just seems beyond the pale, man.
It really does. It makes me think of the term gatekeeper. I hate to say that, because there's a lot of good doctrine, a lot of good Bible taught there. I wouldn't have been there otherwise. But when it came to this one particular thing, he's a 30-year veteran, fivefold minister. So, who am I, the student, to question what the instructor has to say?
Well, perhaps he wanted you to come to no greater conclusion about the Jesuits, say, than perhaps Alex Jones has come to.
Yes, yeah, that's it's very
Yeah,
interesting, and
and
I
other
really,
gatekeepers.
yes, I only scratched the surface with my research paper.
Yeah.
I'm sure that easily 10 times that amount could come to the fore, and they were pioneers in the vein of Aristotle in so many different fields of science: electromagnetism, optics, astronomy, uh, genetics. And even it was George Lemaitre, I guess is how you say it. Lemaitre is what it looks like. He
Well,
was
yeah, it is
the
true.
Big Bang
There,
cosmic egg in conjunction with Albert Einstein and the theory of relativity.
yeah, there are very, very many talented people caught up in Jesuitism and Catholicism. We can't deny that there are people of great talent working for the
Well,
enemy.
well, they were proponents of what I like to think of as a proper education. So they took over the educational system. There are so many secondary schools and colleges and universities, over 30 of them in the United States alone, that are Jesuit institutions.
Yes, and pretty
So,
much their
I,
influence is in every. It seems like every educational institution in America, or practically every, from the public schools to even most of the seminaries that are not Jesuit, have been influenced by them.
yeah, another thing that I had researched, not really in conjunction with any assignment, but having discovered the National Council of Churches and the Methodist organizations. They were involved in the founding of the National Council of Churches back in the early 1900s, and that's part of the seminaries being undermined.
Right. Yeah.
And that even goes.
Anytime you
Go ahead.
see a consolidation of power like that, like the National Council of Churches, it's for the Antichrist. You'll find the Antichrist and his shadow operatives behind it and all in it, because that's what the Antichrist loves, the consolidation and concentration of power. That's why he wants people like Bernie Sanders and in office so badly. Why he hates Donald Trump. Even though Donald Trump is no great president, as far as I'm concerned, he's not really a great man as far as great men go. But he's doing some things. But he's very deluded himself because he believes he hates socialism, but he's very socialist himself. Most people in America are under the delusion that they're not socialists, especially, I mean, speaking for the conservative side. But while at the same time, they're all walking around as card-carrying members of the most socialist administration on the face of the earth, and that is the Social Security Administration. I mean, if you
Yes,
signed up for that, you signed up for socialism, and that's
that all ties.
undeniable. Yet everyone's in denial about it.
It ties back to admiralty law and your birth certificate, and you're not a free person. You're a bonded servant to the national debt, and that's the whole other ball of wax. But that is something that I am working into now.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot underlying it. They do take care of the details, do they not?
You need a Black's Law dictionary to be able to fish through.
Definitely. Anything else? Anything else that you can do to shed light on the situation you've been through, what you're into, and what's happened to you?
Well, I feel a little adrift, but I would like to put my allegiance behind those who are proponents of the truth, and bring to as many people's attention that I can that their futurism that they're so dearly holding on to is going to lead them astray.
Well,
And
yeah,
the
it is counter-Reformation eschatology. That's what it is. Straight out of the Council of Trent, so many hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, but it's been reinforced by Schofield and Darby and Larkin and so many in between that the indoctrination is very deep. So I don't know what the trick will be to getting people to open their eyes to it. You have any suggestions?
Well, my suggestion is to do what we're doing, and to support the people that are, working at it. And that's all I can do.
You do great work, and I think I may have mentioned in some of our online communications that I had watched on YouTube Robert Carangola from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he has a very well thought out, concise, methodical approach to explaining the problems and then what the realities are.
Yeah, I've watched his entire series, and he's one of the few amillennialists that turn you to E.B. Eliot. Okay. And even though he holds up E.B. Eliot, unfortunately, he buys into the amillennialism rather than the premillennialism that E.B. Eliot espoused. So, but anyway, and I read his book too. What was it on the Daniel 9:27, the 70th week?
I was thinking it might have been entitled 70 Weeks. But
yeah, that's the one, 70 Weeks. He wrote back in the 1980s. And the only problem I had with his book is that he used way too much conjecture, to establish his case. But I guess he was going against a overly, completely conjectured case of dispensationalism of the day. So, but he used a lot of conjecture. And I try to stay away from conjecture myself in establishing my case for historic eschatology, because I don't like to take a rule, out of their playbook, the dispensational playbook, because their whole thesis is established on conjecture completely. That's all they have, is hypotheses and conjecture. And studying into amillennialism, which I've been doing, I've been reading several of the standard works on amillennialism, and they have nothing either, except for hypotheses and conjecture. And so it's founded on the same foundation of dispensationalism. So you're not going to convert any dispensationalism using their rule book. I don't think so anyway. And then another thing I've discovered is just going off here on the topic is that, wasn't able to follow that train of thought out. I'm having a teenage moment here.
Some people call it squirrels.
Yeah.
It'll
come back to me.
Subscribe to premillennialism, and I'm in agreement with you in that the 7th 1,000-day year is upcoming. And I kind of wondered if the 120th Jubilee in 2045 might be worth taking a look at. Also, the September 23rd, 2017 celestial star alignment, from my understanding, that recurs on 2,000-year cycles.
Yeah, and I've addressed that in the past. That's using astrology, or astronomy, I should say, to interpret the scripture, and that's not what we do. Yeah, that's not a valid interpretation for the Revelation, and especially that chapter. And the other thought that I lost there was that, the dispensationalists, they love to say that they are the literalists, but it's a smokescreen, because they are anything but literalists. Okay? Because if they were literalists, then they would take the 70 weeks, the 490 years, as literal, contiguous 490 years. But they're not literalists. I had one so-called dispensational literalist say, I take the Bible literally. And then he espoused how that the grasshoppers, the locusts, that had tails and stingings and all that stuff. He says, see, those are helicopters. And I said, no, that's not taking the Bible literally,
Right.
Those are actually locusts if you're going to take it literally. So they're not literalists either. It's just a smokescreen that they've learned to use and to make a claim, and then they add that to add like a badge that they wear. I'm a literalist and you're not, but they're no more literalist than anyone else. They're only literalists where it serves them, and where it doesn't serve them, as in the 70 weeks of Daniel being literal and contiguous, well, then, they violate the divine timeline, literally. So,
yes.
And yeah, so they're not, they can't stand on that, but they do anyway.
Well, I do look forward to partnering with you, and you have my contact information. If there's something that you would like to put me to task on or anything of that nature, let me know. My schedule will intensify as the growing season comes along, as we consider ourselves organic and large gardeners. So looking forward to getting in the ground. We've only had 17 inches of rain since the beginning of the year, so I'm a little concerned about that at the moment.
Yeah, well, I wish I had that concern over here. I just planted a bunch of hay, and it looks like it might die.
Oh, goodness. Well, we'll pray for you some rain.
Yeah, that would be nice. So it seems like we're entering into a drought, but I'm hoping for some latter rain here, because our rainy season is coming into the last of it. So hopefully we'll get some. Okay, well, thank you so much, Patrick. I appreciate you spending a little time with me on the air. We'll be in touch, okay?
Great. Bye-bye.
Okay. All right. You're listening to Cross the Border, and we're going to come back after some messages and continue the broadcast. Don't go anywhere.